Hello everybody, this is Jai Cross with Exploring Sacred Topics. I've really been looking forward to this month's presentation because today we will be cultivating sacred passion. I'd like to read a little blurb I wrote up about the show so you have an idea what we're going to be discussing, what we're going to be doing today. Most Westerners carry a backload of repressed emotions, as if dragging a heavy sledge behind them. By clearing out this unacknowledged and unexpressed baggage, we can live in wonder in the present moment. Once freed from old emotional residues and taints, an innate sense of wonder encourages us to fully feel our emotions as they arise, to express our feelings without guilt, and to live from our passions. So if you want some of that, please stick around. This show's an hour long. It is not a question and answer format. However, I would love to hear from you. If you have anything you care to share, any questions, any comments, you can email me at jaiscross@gmail.com, and I will definitely get back in touch with you or answer them on a following show. Always enjoy audience participation, but this show is being recorded in both audio format and video, and that means that I really don't have the time to go back and forth with a chat screen as well. To start with, I ask you to close your eyes. Let's go inside. Let's settle in a little bit. Let's bring our energy back home. This is an invitation to let go of any energetic attachments you may have had to your day or the things of your day. Use the breath to center yourself in your body, in the place you are right now, in this very moment. Hopefully your mind is still, not jabbering at you. If it is chattering away, then keep bringing your attention back to the breath. It's really so easy to grant ourselves the peace and serenity of going within. From this place of stillness, I ask you to recall a time when you felt very enthusiastic about something. Might be a recent incident, might be something that happened long ago, but make it something real, some actual occurrence that you were a part of, where you felt a fire of enthusiasm. Take a few moments to recreate that incident, that event, remembering the particulars. And now let go of those particulars and allow yourself to sink in to the embrace of that enthusiasm. Feel it, surrender to it. And make some mental notes. What does it feel like? Notice if it tends to be concentrated in one part of your body, the sensation tends to dwell in one particular place. If there is a color associated with this feeling. What might that color be? See if you can amplify the sensation, the feeling, the emotion. Sort of like blowing on a fire at first to get it going. In fact, maybe the breath can help with this. See if you can feel that enthusiasm throughout your entire physical being. Touching every cell, awakening every cell, activating every cell. And now we're going to come out of it, but it's certainly okay to linger in the sensations, to allow them to be in the background of our discussion. So as you're ready, open your eyes. Come back to the realization that you are seated or standing or located somehow in a particular place at a particular time. I wonder how long it's been since you felt that fire of enthusiasm. Hopefully not very long. Hopefully that's a very familiar sensation that you manage to experience in the course of a regular day. Nothing out of the ordinary. A part of your regular makeup. A part of the way you approach life. In our society, in our modern Western culture, enthusiasm has become something of a rare commodity. We live, it's almost as if we live in a swamp, an energetic swamp. There are so many heavy, predominant emotions circulating around. There's so much fear, there's so much guilt, there's so much angst, there's so much shame. Unless we take steps to shield ourselves from these heavy vibrations, they can penetrate into our field and lodge there. We might feel anger or resentment and not even know the cause. What provoked that? It might not be our anger or our resentment. It might be something that actually belongs to someone else, that just latched on to us because we had an opening in our energetic field. It's always amazing to me that I live in the richest country in the history of the world. Yet in the face of such opulence, there is so much suffering. Even if people have enough to eat, have good shelter, have a lot of great possessions surrounding them, our population is so often afflicted with the heaviness of emotion. It's not just that the circumstances of life are so difficult, because in comparison with other countries, with other societies, ours isn't that difficult a place to live. And yet, there are these emotional undercurrents that can sweep us away, that can knock us off our energetic center, that can completely upset our internal balance, that can essentially sweep us away in the current. We make ourselves more prone to these dark currents when we allow emotions to fester within us. Denial is a big part of our society. And that feeds what many people refer to as the shadow. The shadow is that unconscious part of our beings. The part that not only do we not know, we probably don't want to know. The part we would rather avoid. The part we would rather cover over. Not talk about, not deal with. The part that we do, in fact, push into the shadow, out of our conscious awareness. No, I'm not going to deal with that. I know I have some feelings of shame in there, but I'm not going to make them stronger by talking about them or trying to figure out their origin or trying to work through them. That may seem like a compelling argument. It's fine to try that approach. The problem is it doesn't work. By repressing our emotions, we don't cause them to disappear. We just send them underground. They're still in there. They actually gain strength oftentimes by being relegated out of our consciousness. We put them in the background, but in the background they become mischief makers, popping up at unexpected times, derailing our good intentions. Much better to face up to those emotions, even if they're uncomfortable, and to allow them some form of expression, some measure of life. We see what happens when we don't do that, when we don't express our emotions. There are so many addictions in our society these days, so many compulsions, so many unnatural drives. You see people addicted to alcohol, to drugs, to sex, to shopping, to video games, to work. That's a big one, for sure. A lot of the driving force behind these unnatural patterns, behind these exaggerations, these distortions, a lot of that derives directly from emotional repression. We see something in ourselves that either we don't like or we don't think somebody else is going to like, and we try to squash it. People who seek approval are especially vulnerable to this kind of pattern. They don't want to show a part of themselves that might get them in trouble, a part of themselves that others might dislike them for. We're essentially taught these things, taught to not show our anger, taught to keep our depressions to ourselves, taught to not openly speak about our sense of shame or unworthiness. Now those two, shame and unworthiness, run so deep and are so prevalent that I'm going to spend a lot of time in our next show discussing those in some depth, looking at the origin of those, because they're so commonplace. And yet many people don't know where they came from. Why would I be feeling shameful? And even if you have an idea, that might not be the root cause. And so again, we'll spend a lot of time next month looking at that. Well, many of us in this pattern of emotional repression develop what are referred to as a pain body or the pain bodies. Very often this is located in the belly area. It's no coincidence that many people who emotionally repress develop ulcers or other gastric disturbances. There's something in our physiology that causes these unexpressed emotional energies to congregate in that one area. My old pattern was strong emotional repression. There was a lot about myself that I didn't like. I certainly didn't want to show to other people. So there was a lot that I kept inside. And I especially kept it in my gut area. I had ulcers, psychosomatic ulcers. I had a number of different GI tract problems and bowel problems. And it's been so wonderful the last 15 years or so, now that I've allowed myself more freedom of expression, to see those old physical complaints dissolve. Not plagued by them at all anymore. When we do develop that behavior of stuffing of an emotion, of stifling it, let's look at the mechanism, how that might work. The emotion, an energetic response to something, whether internal or external, but an energetic response starts to arise in our beings. It has a physical component as well as an energetic component. But we don't allow it to come to fruition. We essentially strangle it at some point. We abort it. But that dead fetus is still in us. It sets off a pattern where the energy that was never allowed expression still seeks exit, still seeks to get outside, still reappears. And the more we repress it, the more disguised that energy can become. It comes out in really strange ways. It's almost as if we're upping the pressure in our systems, not allowing things out, keeping it clamped down. We've all heard about postal workers who flipped out. Apparently that was a very repressive bureaucracy that people found themselves in. And they were encouraged not to express themselves freely. And many of them reached a breaking point eventually. It's so strange. Over and over again, I would read these newspaper articles or things online talking about these people. And of course, that's where the expression going postal comes from. And almost invariably, their neighbors and their friends and their coworkers would say something like, "Oh, he was such a nice guy. I never expected him to do anything like this." Because the mask was so convincing to everybody. But the mask was in direct opposition to the internal environment. And when the mask broke, tragedy ensued because the pressure was so great. It was an explosion. And they essentially would run amok. Unfortunately, many times they would run amok with a firearm and take a lot of people down with them. Now, most of us aren't in that situation. It's not that extreme, and it never will be that extreme for us. And yet, most of us carry an emotional backload of repressed emotions. It's as though we've got a big backpack on, and we walk through our lives with that extra weight that pulls us down, that limits our freedom of expression. It's hard to feel light if you've got a heavy backpack on. It's hard to be spontaneous. It's hard to be graceful. It's hard to move enjoyably if you're carrying all that extra weight. It leads to a sense of disconnection, profound disconnection, because what we're disconnecting from is our truth, the reality of our inner being, which communicates to us very often through emotions. That's what we're cutting off. So that disconnection quite often leads to feelings of alienation. We know something's wrong, we're not sure exactly what it is, can't quite put our finger on it because the pattern is so entrenched that we don't even notice what we're doing when we chop those emotions down. A very dangerous pattern, because it curtails any sense of fulfillment and life satisfaction that we might otherwise find. It's always so curious to me when I go to a Central American country or South American country and I'm hanging out with the local people, indigenous people quite often, and they're so happy. They tend to have this inner light that just shines out. They laugh a lot, they're natural, they're free in their movements. And quite often these are people that by our standards have nothing. They are in dire poverty. They have food to eat, actually pretty good food to eat, natural diet. And they have little shelters, but they don't have much beyond that. Maybe a few animals, the very basic tools for survival in whatever environment they live in. But not many clothes, not many personal possessions, not many toys, certainly not devices, not electronic devices. Yet, on the whole, they're much, much happier than the people I see in our rich Western societies. It seems to me that one of the main reasons for that disparity is the way we treat our emotions. So everybody has heard the phrase, trust your heart. Just do what your heart says. Well, let's take a look at that, because sometimes I would not want to do what my heart was suggesting. It seems like that would be very questionable advice. You're probably familiar with the model that we have three brains in us that work cooperatively at times and at other times not so cooperatively. One trying to take over, run the show. Well, I feel that we have three hearts, and this is not going to be seen anatomically, but I think it's a useful model to suss out the different ways that emotions express themselves and the different ways that we should relate to emotions. So let's start with the outermost heart. By outermost, I don't mean it's outside of the body, but it is influenced by external events very strongly. Its orientation is directed outwards. This heart I call the hungry heart, because it's so often trying to grasp on to something, trying to influence circumstances so that we will get our wish, our preference, our choice. So just think about that for a moment. What in your life might be due to that hungry heart at play? The hungry heart is definitely involved in a lot of romantic relationships. And the other parts of the heart are as well. But if you listen to country western music, a lot of those songs are written from the standpoint of the hungry heart. A lot of rock and roll songs too, kind of crybaby rock and roll. She did me wrong, and oh, she was such a witch, and oh, I gave her my heart, and she put it in the garbage disposal. All the lyrics like that. This emotional place comes from weakness. It's not grounded deeply into our being. It's a very superficial, let's see, looking for a word here, interface between ourselves and the outer world. Again, mostly directed outwards. So a lot of disappointment that people feel, it's a valid emotion because we feel it, but a lot of that springs from the connivings of the hungry heart, trying to get its way, and that feeling of disappointment when it doesn't get its way. A lot of blame comes from here as well. You made me do that. You made me feel angry. You made me get drunk and lose my job. All kinds of excuses. And again, even though the source might be the hungry heart, there's validity in the feeling simply because we're feeling them. But luckily, we can go deeper into our makeup and find emotions that more clearly represent our inner beings and our deepest truths and our most precious values. So let's move in one step into what I call the singing heart. This is not a place of grasping, like with the hungry heart. This tends to be a place more of contentment, because it is a deeper aspect of our being and of our feeling. When we're in a good relationship with the singing heart, it acts like it is singing. Emotional currents move through us like songs. And if we allow them to express themselves, we tend to have very rich, creative, colorful lives. Now, some of those emotions are not going to be the most comfortable. Sometimes we're feeling grief over a loss. And yes, that's something in the outer world that provoke the emotion. But nonetheless, it can be a very deep way of feeling and of expressing ourselves, allowing that grief to move through, allowing sadness to pass through us. Now, the word emotion has motion in it, and emotions, a key part of their makeup is that flow. Emotions are often associated with the element of water. That's a very good association because water has that fluidity, that flexibility, that freedom, constant motion. You see this in small children. Their emotions change so rapidly. They don't fix on one. So in contrast to the singing heart, the hungry heart does tend to grapple onto emotions, to run, especially an uncomfortable emotion, over and over again. So at age 50, you might still be feeling guilt over something you did at age 10. That gets into a gray area. Is that really an emotion? That energetic pattern that gets stimulated over and over again like you're pressing a button. The reason we press those buttons, the reason we fall into these cyclical patterns where nothing's resolved, is that the emotion has become associated with a thought or a cluster of thoughts. And when we run those thoughts through our mind, it stimulates the old corresponding emotional pattern. So these are really more secondary emotions. With the singing heart, that energetic current arises spontaneously throughout the events of our life. But it doesn't linger a long time. So we get the richness of one expression, and then as we change scene, quite often the emotional current changes as well. There's a natural rhythm to this, allowing these song-like expressions to pulse through us. This is a key to satisfied living. So let's look at the innermost heart. I call this the sacred heart. This is the place where, as opposed to emotions that are stimulated or provoked by external circumstance, we find more states of being. We experience the emotional sensations that are associated with being fully human. This is the permanent residence of some of the most exalted emotions we can feel. They can be provoked by other means as well. But such qualities as gratitude, that has deep roots within us. Even though it can be provoked by an external situation. When we open ourselves to that feeling of gratitude, we connect with our beings on a very deep level. Love. That's another one. Of course, that word love has so many different definitions, so many different applications. It can be the love of country western songs that somebody done somebody wrong. It can be love of the singing heart, where a magpie is flying right now outside my window, and just, wow. There's a part of me that actually loves that bird. Watching it sit with its iridescent long tail, looking at the wing flaps as it moved from the post it was perched on down to the ground. You know, there's a sense of wonder in that kind of love, where you just look at something, wow. Yeah. Sense of affirmation. That's very, very different from the grasping kind of romantic love that is popularized in songs and movies and TV shows and novels and lots of other things. It's actually glorified that the peak experience followed oftentimes very soon after by the real bottoming out experience, like roller coaster ride of emotions. It doesn't work that way in the Sacred Heart. The Sacred Heart exudes these qualities. They seem to stem more from our soul than from our learned experience. They're part of the hardwired package that we bring into our lives as humans. Sense of acceptance would be another. You can almost think of these as virtues rather than emotions. Again, states of being. I like that phrase. I think it describes them well. Compassion. Forgiveness. Now, forgiveness might be thought of as an act more than an emotion. But in the act of forgiveness, There's an emotion that arises deep within me that connects me all the way back. There are others as well, but I think that's enough of a list for now. So hopefully you feel the difference in those qualities of being. So you can definitely trust the Sacred Heart. And after you've done some cleaning to relieve the pressure that might have built up from unrepressed emotions, you can trust the Singing Heart. The Hungry Heart's always going to be questionable, because that's where the ego gets in, and that's where thoughts become attached with the emotions. And so again, you're dealing more with secondary emotions. They're not pure flows anymore. They're hybrids. And so they don't follow the course of emotions. I want to talk about passion. Of course, the topic for today is cultivating sacred passion. Passion's an odd word. Maybe you've heard of the passion of Jesus. That refers to his suffering and death. So I looked up the origin of our word passion. It comes from a Latin word meaning to suffer. So that was an early meaning, but I want to refer to passion as defined in my Merriam-Webster's dictionary as a strong feeling of enthusiasm or excitement for something or about doing something. Maybe now it makes sense, that initial exercise I had you do, feeling that fire of enthusiasm, feeling that passion that you had for something in your experience. Let me share a few quotations by well-known people on passion. First is from Nelson Mandela. There is no passion to be found in playing small, and settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. There is no passion to be found playing small, in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. So he associates passion with that full expression of ourselves. What I consider to be our birthright, where we express our inner potential. Martha Graham says, great dancers are not great because of their technique. They are great because of their passion. It's that inner fire that drives them. And that's obvious to someone watching a dance performance. If someone is just going through a sequence of learned movements, or if they are inspired to be fully present in the moment, to share themselves through their dance. Very different. T.D. Jakes says, it is your passion that empowers you to be able to do that thing you were created to do. Wow, that thing you were created to do. Yeah, I agree. And George Wilhelm Heinrich Hegel said, nothing great in the world has ever been accomplished without passion. Different takes. I feel that if we follow our passions, not our addictions, not our seekings of fulfillment in the outer world, but if we follow the inner guidance that's encoded into each one of us, I feel that if we follow our passions that way, they're going to lead us to our purpose, to that thing you were created to do. that thing that in doing is going to feel like the fulfillment of your life. Maybe not your whole lifespan, but in that moment. Going to feel like your total fulfillment. That you are doing exactly the thing that you are supposed to do in exactly the right way and exactly the right time. So I want to recommend an exercise for you to do to uncover something of your passion. We won't have time for it on this broadcast, but well, maybe we'll start on this broadcast. Let's devote 4 minutes to this. Once again, close your eyes, go internal. And I want you to look around inside for your passions. What is it that really fires you up? And feel each one a little bit. Now, don't just make it into a checklist, but feel that sensation when you are living that passion, when you are doing that thing. Call it forth. Hopefully you'll have a few of them so you can go from one to another. It might take you a little while. That's okay. We're going to spend a couple of minutes on this. As you're going through, really ask yourself, is this my passion or is this just something I enjoy doing? Does it really light me up or not? Okay, just a few more seconds, finish it up. And again, do allow yourself to feel the sensation associated with your passion. When you're ready, open your eyes. And I wonder how that was for you. I imagine some people did have a number of things that were just right on the tip of their tongue. They could have listed them off in a conversation, gone through 3 or 4 things that just really juice them up, really inspire them consistently. And for others, it might have been more difficult to come up with 1 or 2. These are questions we don't ordinarily ask ourselves. These are not usually found on a job resume. We don't even usually talk about this stuff with close friends. If you know somebody, you're expected to know what turns them on. So let's say one of your passions, I'm looking outside the window right now up towards Taos Ski Valley. Get a lot of people coming here on their vacations. Let's say one of your passions is skiing. But due to your job and where you live, you can only ski once or twice a year. But you know that whenever you do it, it's more than just a thrill. It opens you up. You feel so alive. You wish you could have more of it in your life. Well, possibly you can. And I don't mean quitting your job and moving to Taos. But when you start exploring passions, oftentimes we'll find that different activities are linked. So maybe it's not just skiing that does it for you. Maybe something that's a little more accessible gives you something that same sensation. Maybe rollerblading or ice skating or dancing. And these are things that you can explore more regularly, that you can incorporate more into your life. Yet it might be very important for you to plan that ski trip at least once a year when you can, to indulge yourself that way. I would recommend that you spend at least 15 minutes doing a passion review, trying to figure out what's current for you. And if you've done an exercise like this, see if it's really current. Your list might have changed. There might be something new that's come into your life that you're just starting to explore. And take some notes. Write these things down. Don't make it into just a daydreaming thing. But come up with the information and put it through that truth check. When you come up with something like skiing, does that really get you going? Does the thought of it just rev you up? Or has it actually become something that you've sort of outgrown? That it used to get you going, but now not so much. So do an honest assessment, a passion search. Take some notes, and then look for patterns. How often do you do an activity that you're passionate about? This can be some of the most important stuff in your life. This is the time when you feel fully alive. So are you making room for it? Are you making space for it? Are you structuring your life around those things that really get you going? I work with a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, a lot of people who have a very defined and developed passion in their lives. It's interesting seeing how they make choices. Some of them respect that passion, they honor it, and they want to figure it into their life plan. They consider it very deeply when looking at the prospect of a new job, a move to a new locale, things like that. Other people do the opposite. They devalue the passion. Oh yeah, well, I like being in the band, but I got a better job offer, so I think I'll probably do that. Without giving the credence to the part that makes their lives the most enjoyable. I often base my decisions factoring very strongly in my passions because, again, that for me very directly leads to purpose. And I don't want to go against a life purpose that I have. That usually has negative consequences. Even if a job looks really good, even if an opportunity seems very appealing, if that job or that opportunity involves me going against myself, it's usually not a very good idea. What I'm getting at is that it's important to respect your incarnation, to do the things that nourish the deeper you. It's great when you can work that out and it's in sync with a comfortable outer you as well. But it's really the inner one that's most important, because if you keep siding with that, it's going to take you to good places. It's going to take you to those places that you're intended to go, that you're meant to see, to experience, and to be in this lifetime. I also work with many people, counsel them that early in their lives felt that they had to do things that took them away from their passions. A lot of times these early things involved getting a job, helping to support the family. They couldn't go on to college. They couldn't pursue career as an artist, as a creative person. I had to do the 8 to 5, get the paycheck. And it's quite possible that that was the correct decision, that the family need outweighed their own desires. Yet check to see if that's still the case, because if you're in your 30s or 40s or above, things might have changed. Maybe it's time to go back to work with those old emotions that had to be stifled for a time. To do some repair work and to see what can be done to reignite those passions. Maybe even going back, getting some education now, maybe taking up art as a hobby. Maybe just changing the way you relate to yourself instead of from a sense of obligation, from overvaluing work to more an appreciation of what's possible if you go back and make a different choice around those passions. If you take the time to suss out, what might my purpose be now? I had to take a detour, but now I'm at a place of choice. How would I choose if I had full freedom? Might be some interesting answers in there. When we work with those old repressed emotions, when we start letting off some of the pressure that's built up, things start becoming clearer. We start getting glimmers of our instincts, our intuitions, our insights. Instead of following an outer program, we start to open to inner directives. We start to becoming more present. We start feeling more grateful for the things of our lives, more accepting of ourselves, the way we're constructed, and the choices we've made. We start enjoying life more. We start being ourselves more. Paul Lowe had a great quote. He said, "Follow your twinkle." So those things that bring a twinkle, those are worth pursuing, because there's something in our being that's responding to something out there. And oftentimes that's a very worthy path to follow. We're being led in a good direction. We're being shown something that is calling for the true us to wake up, to shake off our obligations. I have a lot of admiration for people who take on responsibility, who do make those hard choices to oftentimes serve others first. And there comes a time when it's our turn. Because we have a lot of truth inside us. If we never allow ourselves the opportunity to sing our warrior's song, to be our full self, then we sell ourselves short. It is quite possible to live a life of service that includes service to ourselves. It doesn't have to be either or, although it's often presented that way. That you have to choose the one way that benefits other people or the other way that benefits yourself. Oftentimes, there's a middle option where all benefit. I've worked a lot with people who are dying. People are approaching the end of their physical existence. It's heartbreaking to hear some of the things that they say about they wish they'd had more time to develop their passions, essentially. To be with their family, to travel more, to do more things, to get out of the rut that they dug themselves very early in life. To enjoy life more. So don't end up that way on your deathbed, wishing that things had been different for you. That's a tough way to go. Well, I want to mention a number of different broadcasts that are coming up on Human Spirit Radio. Most broadcasts are live on the Friday of the month at 2 o'clock Pacific time. Of course, you can always access Human Spirit Radio broadcasts in the archives at your convenience. The first Friday of each month at 2 o'clock Pacific is Waking Gods and Goddesses, Embodying Divine Wisdom and the Sensual Life with host Maria West. I occupy that second Friday, that time slot. And my next broadcast on November 14th is entitled Developing Sacred Power. I want to read you the blurb on that because, as I mentioned, it segues well with this broadcast, goes a little deeper. It actually goes a lot deeper. As young children, we are so receptive that we absorb beliefs and behaviors without much filtering or conscious choosing. When our core beliefs come to include doubts around our self-worth, our connection to sacred power is greatly compromised. Luckily, we can purify that divine channel and reclaim the full measure of vitality that is our human birthright. So I hope you join me for that show. Again, that's live November 14th at 2 o'clock Pacific, but you can always find it in the archives, either in audio or video format for my shows. The third Friday of each month is Human Spirit Radio founder and host Sarah McCroskey. She's actually taking this month off. So if you want, you could listen to her by just going in and pulling out one of those archives for a previous show that you missed. Fourth Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, is Amanda Elois Johnson with the Conscious Evolution of Divine Feminine Archetypes. This is a show for both men and women, although she tends to concentrate on the feminine archetypes. In addition, on the third Wednesday of each month at 6 p.m. Pacific is You Are Already Psychic, Tools to Strengthen Your Intuition, Follow Your Divine Guidance, and Live a Joy-Filled Life with host Jessica Gabriel McKay. So hope you take advantage of those. A lot of good things out there on Human Spirit Radio. Love to share with you. All right. Goodbye for now. Namaste.